ego death has become one of the most celebrated ideas in modern spirituality. But if dissolving the ego leaves you less grounded, less accountable, and less present in your life, that is an awakening. It's avoidance. Just dressed up in spiritual language. Today we're diving into ego death and debunking what everyone is talking about and everyone is trying to practice in their lives. My name is Michael Perry and I'm joined today by Justin Gates. This is the new Ashla Podcast. Hello and welcome to the new Ashla Podcast, home of spirituality, psychology, and metaphysics, where we like to dive into the shadow and work on self-mastery. Today we're going into ego death. Now, I know you have fun with this because when I first started talking to you when I got into this scene, I was like, so how do we get rid of the ego? How do we stop it from controlling our lives? And you just had that look you have now.
No, my friend, we do not. We do not. And you were very perplexed by that. You said it very well. Very well. The show opening kind of lays it out, right?
Yep.
You know, we're just dressing this stuff up. You need it. This is one of the most misunderstood concepts on any spiritual path, really, is the ego. It is. It's a tough one because depending on who you talk to and where you go and even what you read. We talked about self-help books and stuff in last show. And, you know, we really talked about that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, this is some good information, but some of this is dangerous. So somewhere along the way...
You got to sift through the weeds.
You do. Somewhere along the way, and long before me, probably thousands of years before me, maybe, the ego became synonymous with arrogance and selfishness or moral failure. But the definition is incomplete here. We're not looking at the whole picture, and it's dangerous when taken seriously, quite honestly.
I completely agree on that. I mean, it's just, the ego is so vital to our development. You really helped me awaken to this truth because ego is so necessary for us to be successful in life. And I don't even mean that in an egotistical way, but right. Ego is what drives us to succeed. It's what drives us to build. It's what drives us to expand.
Yeah.
You know, I love Courtney's little definition of spirit where it's kind of like God on an island just chilling there being like, it's all good, man.
Right.
Let's relax and kick it. Life cannot go on like that. If everyone were to tap into spirit and just rely on spirit, the world would stand still.
Well, I always talk about balance kind of this way, a left and right orientation, but it's also up and down, right? There is a center. There is a center spot where we really try to hang out, and holistically, that's how we find that center. And without the ego, there is no grounding. We need to be grounded, but we also need to, kind of keep our eyes to the sky a little bit too. We have to find that in us. And it's important because it's the part of you that says, this is me, this is not. Or this is my responsibility, this is your responsibility. Right? Yeah. This is my choice, so on and so forth. A healthy ego is what allows us to show up consistently, too. It's how we develop our habits. Without it, we would just be like a mess, honestly. And I just want to say real quick, I know throughout 90-something episodes now, we've always talked about how the ego shouldn't be killed, but we also talk about how we shouldn't let it be in control of everything. So if you've only caught a few of our episodes, understand, hear me now, we're talking about balancing our ego with our spirit, right? With our mind, with our soul, with our heart, all these things we try to bring into balance. So, yeah.
No, and it's so important you brought that up because when it comes to ego, I mean, like we like to talk about discernment. Everything is about discernment. And letting the ego run the show, that's when ego becomes a problem.
Right.
Ego's there to let you know where your boundaries are. Like you said, your identity. It's what gives you agency. But at the same time, ego is something that very easily can get hung up on itself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it has, and we say this a lot, but it has basically one main job, and that's to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And, it's to keep us from pushing too far, or because it wants to keep us in the familiar. It wants to keep us in that certainty, right? And not all things are certain. So that's why we got to bring it back to center.
Here's sort of a teaching lesson.
But it's still necessary for sure. Without it, we're in trouble, dude. Without it, you have no integrity, Michael. Without it, you have no accountability. Without it, you can't even erect any kind of boundaries, let alone hold them.
Percent. And when it comes to this, I mean, I want your take on this. How much do you think that ego and the unconscious mind are very much almost the same being to a degree, as far as the way they operate? Because this is something I've spent a lot of time reflecting on, and I've wanted to ask you about this for a long time now. And it's just the unconscious mind, which is 95% of our thoughts, is rooted in the identity of the ego.
Right. Well, yeah, I would say, and in our chat with Deepak, he kind of touched upon this, where it is, the ego, he believes the ego lives in that subconscious part. And because ego is kind of like a program, right, that runs out, that helps run our system, we don't consciously think about shrinking away from something or being scared of success, for example. But our ego certainly has something to do with that. But this goes back to training and practicing and developing disciplines around things that help us regulate the ego, help us tame it, help it bring it into alignment with the rest of us. And so I would say, yes, it does. I don't know if it's 100% centered in there, but it certainly is a part.
A main driver?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. And we talked about in another show where we said there's actually a show short from one of our shows that I cut out and put out there in the interwebs, where we're talking about ego being a rogue program sometimes. And yeah, I mean, if your subconscious is your operating system, the ego is definitely at the center of that. I think it has to be. But I tend to not let myself think about where these things live, right? Simply because I don't care if it's in the subconscious personally. I just know it has to be tamed. And if I tame it, if I put my heart and my soul and my body and my mind, and I start to put these things in alignment, everything will start to fall in place, and everything will start to kind of mesh together better for my higher good, which of course radiates out to others. And then you can start to become that anchor, and then you can start to become that person that can mentor and teach and sit with people. So I don't know if that answered your question. I think so. But.
Yeah, no, it does, definitely. Well, I think that's something important to bring up as we go through this episode, because the ego, understanding how our ego operates, is so imperative to learning how to work with it.
Yeah.
How to tame it, for lack of a better phrase. Because when the ego has control, which in most cases it does, like that's, I think, what the whole spiritual awakening path is becoming conscious of ego and what it is. I remember when I used to hear the term ego, I would always think of narcissists and dictators and just people who were really egotistical.
Right.
And it's like, I don't got an ego.
I hope you do.
I don't. Yeah. I don't care how humble you are. If you got one. Crap, half of that's probably your ego.
And that brings me back to our last chat with Courtney, because she really talks about this in this way. She talks about, yes, we really, really need it. We really need it because, if your sense of self is unstable or unformed or fractured, trying to erase it does not lead to awakening. It leads to more fracturing. It leads to complete disassociation, which is really bad, right? And you can dress it up with all the fancy words like enlightenment or all these other spiritual things that sound good and feel good, but they don't last because they're not real. They're not real. What you're actually doing is you're going to start to spiritually bypass where your identity is abandoned, and you're not going to heal. You're just going to cause more fracturing. So, on this path, we do not see ego as the enemy. It is an instrument. No. It's part of us, literally part of us.
Yeah. I remember when we were having the conversation about the ego and how you told me how the ego for you was something that was malleable. Mm-hmm. It was something that you used in different ways in different times in different situations. And that perplexed me for a long time because I had to really chew on that and think about it. But it's true. The ego, think of social mass, right? We talk about that often. the different masks we wear in different social environments.
Right.
That is all different forms of ego, and it's learning to master it where you can have whatever mask you need in that present situation. If you're in a high conflict area, you don't want to be that happy-go-lucky person. You want to be that assertive, discerning, and vigilant person.
Right. Yeah. It learns along with us, right? And if we can, the better we can align things to our purpose, to our intentions, to our authentic way of being, it will start to see oh, this is actually good for me to do this. It's actually good for me to not give a crap about what people think of me. Not so far as you become so disassociated with people, but that your words, your opinions, I read your comments out there, and it's not usually our core group of listeners, but I'll catch a stray every once in a while, and it just kind of, because I have that healthy dose of I don't give a what, right? And that's a healthy ego. It's very difficult, even the people I love the most in this life. Their words do not wound me anymore, for the most part, because I default to they're having a bad day, so I must be careful how I react or respond, right? So, but that comes with, again, this aligning of the ego, making it a part of who you are, and I don't believe you can live without it. And so trying to kill the ego, trying to suppress it, trying to do whatever, you're just gonna, as we talked about in the show about the shadow work, the Unicode being a good framework for shadow work, as we talked in there, the more you try to suppress, the more you try to get rid of, the more you try to do any of this stuff, it just grows larger, but it grows larger in a way that you can't control. So, you have to teach it discipline. You have to teach it that it needs the rest of you, right?
Yeah.
We need to be whole. We need to have that structural integrity on all parts. Killing it, killing your feelings, right? I hear that one a lot. Killing your feelings or pushing them down. It does not serve anything related to enlightenment or ascension or any of these fancy spiritual words either. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah.
Well, and words matter. I mean, I think what most people are looking for when they're trying to contemplate ego death is what they're looking for is paradigm shifts. Yep. Which a paradigm shift is, we talked about awareness and integration, right? Awareness is this. Integration is the paradigm shift. It is when all of a sudden your reality shifts into your understanding.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's very appealing.
Yeah.
It's not, look, this concept didn't become popular because it's accurate. Because it's not.
No.
It's not accurate. Every guru, even if you look back at the life of Christ, his ego got wounded from time to time, right? And we're told that he is the apex of what we should be doing spiritually by a lot of people. And I think even people who aren't Christian look fondly upon the life and the way Christ handled things. But even Christ dealt with an ego sometimes. And so this isn't an accurate thing, but it's become attractive because it's appealing. Because really, and as we talk about a lot with different things, when we can allow ourselves to feel like we get this promise of relief without having to do a lot of hard work, a lot of digging and a lot of searching and stuff, that's very appealing. It's the magic pill.
Well, I was just about to ask you, why does ego death become spiritually attractive? Why are people so drawn to this?
Think of it like it's like an exit ramp from pain, right? I'm going to avoid that.
Yeah.
There's a big wreck up here. I'm going to go all the way around on some county road and get back. But when you get back to it, it's still piled up, backed up. There's still pain, right?
Yep.
Because true healing, as we talk about a lot, requires slow, demanding work of integration, responsibility. So it's attractive because people see it as a shortcut. Like, if I could just get rid of the ego, then I don't have to deal with this whole healing my karma and whatever else. And also because a lot of us go through this when we contemplate the ego and when we start this work. If I could just get rid of this, I could be more free. I can be free from it, right? So It sounds like freedom, and it does feel that way in a lot of ways. But this fantasy offers, and it is a fantasy, right? It offers
You know?
several things at once, and we get overwhelmed by all the perceived good things about it, but we miss the point of healing. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, I think another big one is it's just, and this takes a lot of self-reflection and self-honesty, radical honesty, is a lot of people use it as a way to avoid accountability.
yes.
It's, this is beneath me. I've transcended this kind of drama. This isn't worth my time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You don't have to commit. You don't have to do the work to repair. You can avoid the pain. And of course, all these are illusions. You can't avoid any of that. Eventually, you're going to come back. You're going to come back full circle to that, and you're going to feel like you're starting over again. But now, as you said many shows ago, the monster's just bigger now. It was something this size, but now it's like this because we took our eyes off of it, right? And there's a point here where I kind of tease the larger spiritual community about this, but then there's, I got rid of my regular person ego, and now they just find a much larger spiritual ego, because what this does, it offers them a sense of a feeling and a sense of superiority, but they're not really embodying anything. I know lots of people that talk about, they speak the language of non-duality or oneness or transcendence, and that's all they need to get that feeling, to just talk about it, just speak about it. But this goes back to integration. We can read, watch, listen, write, speak about all these things, but that's only half of it. If you're not integrating it, then what? Then you're only halfway there. You still have a lot of work to do. And if you put off the integration long enough, then really you're just blowing hot air at some point. You have to integrate. You and I both watch a lot of YouTube, and it's easy to find people who sound really awakened. They sound really, really aligned, and they almost like gurus, right? But when you see them away from the camera, it's really easy to see that they weren't doing much of the integration work.
Oh my gosh.
They're not very emotionally regulated, or they're not really mature. The words don't match what they're doing, or ethically consistent, or any of that stuff. So, and unfortunately, modern spiritual culture amplifies the illusion, doesn't it? It makes it.
Oh my gosh. Well, people want that quick fix pill, right? That instant, this is going to fix all my problems. To your point, I was watching one of my favorite holistic teachers, and he was talking about how he's like really changing his content up because he was really getting into manifesting and stuff like that. And as he was going to these different YouTube groups where people are talking about the same thing, he realized that everyone there, it's like, I manifested my dream job. But I also went to school for 4 years, applied to 20 different jobs, and got lucky because I knew someone in the job and they gave me the job. It's like all these different people talking about how they manifested all these different things in their life.
Right.
Well, my dad died and I got an inheritance, so I manifested this money.
And a lot of people will argue that those are real pathways to things, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know for sure, but I do know one thing for sure, is that the things we talk about, we try to keep it psycho-spiritual, right? We try to stay open while being present now, where we can make the choices, where we can regulate the things in ourselves, and we can align the things, our whole selves, into that whole thing. Because you don't manifest what you don't relate to. You don't manifest to what you don't resonate to.
And you don't manifest what you don't work towards. I think that's the biggest one right there. Is so many people want I want to get it all, but the work involved with getting it. Like, I am a big proponent for manifestation. I think it's definitely a real thing. But I also think you got to meet the universe halfway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We're all created of the universe. We all share. We're all stardust, man. The things that formed suns and stars formed us too. And again, we are all about finding empowerment through alignment. Period. If you summed up what we're all about, that's what we're trying to do. So we don't ignore spirituality. We don't ignore psychology. We don't ignore physical fitness. We don't ignore making the mind sharp, right? We have to do all these things, and we have to make sure that these things again, alignment, 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 alignment. I know I say that a lot, but it's because that is the goal. Alignment is where we're in balance. It's where we find our harmony, where we find all these things. So,
Yeah.
But that's why this stuff is very desirable, because all I have to do is this one thing. All I have to do is kill the ego. And then everything else falls into place. But they're missing they're missing the secret of the secret again. You have to wish it, want it, then do it, then let it go, and let the universe do its part, but we still have to do our part. We can't just look, there are no shortcuts. In other words, there are no shortcuts to any of this stuff. And that's what this illusion is. It's a shortcut. It's a promise of a shortcut. Well, I don't have to do this, I don't have to do that. And then it even gets worse. You'll see people justifying the shortcut. Well, I already lived 152 lives, and I already figured that out back then, so now it's just a matter of just removing this part of me and this part of me, and then expecting me to be whole. I don't care if you lived 1,000 lifetimes. I don't care. The work happens where you are. If you are alive and breathing right now, then you must do the work right now, in the moment, in the present.
You have to.
Well, I mean, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything, but it's not going to work out the way you want it to, or you think it should, and even then we have to be open to let it work the way it's going to work, So, but that kind of touches upon another thing, that this whole trying to kill or suppress the ego, it's really comes back down to control. If I can just control this one thing, well, the more you do that, the more it tends to control you. The more we ignore something, the more control it has over us, as we said in the last show. So we have to pay attention. We have to do the work. I'm sorry, it sucks. I hate it too. But that's just the way it is. Some things in this universe are static. Some things are just the truth, and we have to just deal with it.
Yeah. Well, I think so many people just don't have a good grasp of what all entails an ego. I mean, we have everything from our survival responses, our wants and desires, to our compulsions, to what really drives us in life. And I think that's one of the parts about ego that so many people don't tend to look at, is what is the ego driving me towards? Because like you said, it's looking for safety, it's looking for control, and often those things aren't in our best interest when it's how the ego knows how to go about it, because the ego will do what it knows over what is.
Well, yeah, and because it just repeats familiar patterns. Well, Michael, you went through this trauma, but it didn't kill you, so we're just going to stay there, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, this didn't kill us. It sucked, but we got through it. Look at us. Here we are. So let's just keep repeating this pattern here. This is the devil I know. I'm going to keep.
Yeah, I was just about to say it.
This is the devil I know, right? So I'm going to keep doing this, and that is not in our best interest, because you can't grow that way. You just can't.
And you can't will that part away either. You got to.
Well, ironically, I would say your willpower probably comes from somewhere in this.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So you're literally just shooting yourself in the foot over and over again if you're trying to do this. And here's another point I want to make, is that oftentimes we dig far enough in to where we see the ego, and if we're looking, we can find it. This is where a lot of my problems come from, but we're not digging deep enough, because the ego may be the top of the tree, but it roots down. It roots real far down, right? As far as you can imagine. And it's at the root of things where we have to start not avoiding and not killing it, but this is where we start to transcend, is because once we go deep enough, right? Your analogy of the iceberg, what we see is just a tip of it, and we see the tip. We see the tip of the ego, and we go, if I just crash into that thing, and but we don't realize there's a giant iceberg underneath there, floating beneath the surface.
So, 1,000 times bigger than anything we can imagine.
Right. So, yeah, we have to dig deeper, and that's where a lot of us get kind of jump off the merry-go-round. You know what I mean? Because, oh man, I thought it was just this. It's really this other thing, and I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. I'm just going to avoid that, right? So, and usually come at it, you're trying to kill the ego. You're like, if I just smash this piece right here, that's all I got to do. And then when you smash into that piece and you realize there's a much bigger thing underneath, much bigger piece underneath, then you're like, nope, gonna avoid it. I can't destroy this thing, so I'm just gonna start to avoid it.
So what are some signs for people out there who are doing this work, who are trying to develop, cultivate their ego, or kill their ego, depending on where they're at and who's listening to this? What are some signs that they're actually avoiding their ego? Or the work they need to do with it?
Well, first, and it's something we talk about in shadow work, is once we start to honestly take a look at it, we start to see reoccurring patterns, triggers, or we talked about using the Unity Code in the last episode. You know, when we just see emotions, but we don't believe there can be peace. When we start looking at this thing, right? When we start avoiding these paradoxes that are all around us. That's one way to really kind of see, okay, I see that this thing triggers me. And if I track that long enough, even through a week, because really the same things trigger us over and over again, especially if we haven't addressed them, right? And if we just say to ourselves, if we say, well, okay, I noticed this pattern in me 5 times this week, but it goes away fast enough so I don't have to really look at it, right?
I must be healing it.
Right. Oh, yeah, because it feels better, right? We do this with physical ailments too, right? You know, if we have a cold and we go to the doctor and they give us some steroids and we take those first 1 or 2 hits of steroid, and man, we feel like a superhero, but we're still sick, right? And then we know when we overdo it, because then we're like laid flat out on our behinds again. And so it's once you notice these things and you go out of your way to ignore them, and you will, once you start looking at this stuff, once you start noticing, you will start realizing that, oh man, I'm still doing this again and again and again. And it's really easy to tell because a lot of us are around the same people all the time, right? Either at work or in our family, or with ourselves. We like to trigger ourselves and annoy the hell out of ourselves too. So I think that's probably the biggest one. That was the biggest one for me, was like, why do I keep doing this? And then you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Well, you're doing it over and over again because you're ignoring it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you brought up a really good point with this, because I remember when I started going through the journey, and it's not that I still don't get triggered and I still don't go through it, but when I started becoming aware of what triggered me, things triggered me more.
Yeah.
They always say it gets worse before it gets better. It's because once you become aware of it, you become extra sensitive to your triggers.
Yeah.
And you do get this compulsion to, well, I know if I go into this situation or be around this person, I'm probably going to get triggered. So, you know what? I'm going to avoid the trigger. I'm sure a lot of people fall in that category because, God, did I want to. There were times, especially dealing with the craziness going on at work, where it was just like, I should look for a new job. And it's like, no, this is going to help me grow. Go into those situations, and it doesn't mean it was handled gracefully, but it was work. And it sucked.
Yeah, I mean, and even going past, you know, I'm trying to do some shadow work. I'm not quite sure what it is. I want to repair these things or integrate these things, but it could be simple things too. Like if something happens to you that most people would feel grief over or something, and you are not, that might be a sign that you're avoiding things. If something that happens to you that would make most of us angry, for example, and it doesn't, and you're just like completely detached from that feeling, you might be avoiding, you know. It also, and this is kind of the heart of our episode today, we're talking about, you know, spirituality without psychology type thing, right? And ego avoidance will use spirituality to numb or dissociate from everyday things, grounded things, going to work or paying your bills or whatever. We see that a lot in the spiritual world, where it's like, no, you know, yeah, okay, you can say God's got my back. Okay, that's a good thing. But God still needs you to pay your bills so that you don't starve. So you have a okay. And so you start to dissociate from, I'm just going to call it regular everyday life, because that's where we're grounded and that's where we are. Where
I think
it goes back to language replacing embodiment.
I mean, I think that's one of the issues with the community now. I was listening to this interview the other day, and they were talking about how culture has done this crazy shift with the generations. We went from hustle culture to now this spiritual culture where they don't, like, I don't want to work full-time jobs. I don't want to have to put myself out there. I want to be able to just do what I love. And like, those are great things. I'm not saying don't do that. But often you can't do that without also doing a job that you don't like for a while until you build yourself up.
Right.
You know, it's this complete shift from I'm going to hustle until I die, no rest for the wicked, to I need as much leisure time as possible.
Here's kind of a simple test that cuts through this illusion and tells you if you're trying to suppress, ignore, kill the ego, right? If the path or the spirituality that you follow makes you less grounded, not more, then you might be avoiding something, or you might be trying to suppress, right? If it makes you less able to handle conflict, if conflict gets tougher to deal with, or you run from it more, or you freeze more, like you said, it gets worse before it gets better sometimes, but you might be suppressing, or ignoring, or avoiding. If it makes you less accountable, less present, less relational, that's not awakening. You're trying to avoid, suppress, and true awakening does not pull you out of your life. It roots you more deeply into it, and that requires some work and some pain and some stuff. But the goal here should not be, and this is something that I told you right off the bat, especially when we had these discussions around the ego. It's like, look, the goal here is not for you to lose yourself, right? The goal is to make you stronger and more capable of dealing with the truth about yourself. And truth,
as your authentic self.
Yes. And work on creating that structural integrity of yourself, not fragmenting it more.
I think another big one to look out for is it's like, how often when you're in situations are you blaming others? Sometimes people are to blame, but what is the part you're playing in your own suffering?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, we don't blame and we don't allow ourselves to shame. And look, people will argue that a healthy dose of shame does help us move in a certain direction, but don't overdo it. Don't overdo anything, even the good stuff, right? But yeah, I mean, it doesn't do you any good to ruminate about shame or ruminate about blame, because at some point you got to get up and handle it. You have to deal with it. No one else is dealing with it. No one else feels the pain you're feeling. No one else feels the trauma that you dealt with. No one else feels that. And yes, your feelings are valid. But I promise you, no one else is suffering that. They have their own stuff they're suffering. So the more you suffer, it doesn't push anybody else to do better. You have to do better. Period. That's it.
You got to do it for yourself. One of the hardest lessons I learned is people who want to change for other people often never make meaningful change. The only way to truly change is to do it for yourself.
Yeah. It's the only way it's going to happen. It's the only way to limit your suffering. So where does trauma and dissociation lead to false enlightenment? That's what we're really talking about today, right? Is this false illusionary sense of enlightenment or ascension, or other fancy spiritual words. How does this stuff fit into it?
When we go through things in life, we have these. Trauma is what it is in our lives. It's not these, just don't look in a book and it's like, this counts as trauma. It's never about what happens to us, but what happens inside of us. And we have these fractures of our ego, of our minds. We end up wanting to find ways to just tuck it under the rug and be something new, be something that didn't have to suffer that. I think many people overlook this concept where when life happens to us, it's okay for it to suck. It is okay for it to be hard. It is okay for it to have affected us.
Yeah.
And moving forward doesn't mean moving on.
Because that's the truth. It did affect you. It did. Call it what it is. It did. But what you just said is one of the most important truths that I see that's missing from these spiritual conversations. Right? You said it perfect. When someone has experienced trauma, their sense of self is often fragmented. Long before they ever encounter any spiritual language. Sometimes before they can even talk. Sometimes before they can even walk. The boundaries get blurred and their sovereignty, their agency is weakened from the get-go. And it's very difficult as they grow, right, to be present. It's very hit or miss. And
when it's like our interview with Deepak, sometimes it even comes from our parents. Like,
or grandparents.
Our grandparents, yeah. And it's stuff we're just carrying into this lifetime of baggage that we're going to have to sort through. We don't have to, but
Yeah.
to find a fulfilling and whole life, that is part of the work.
You should. Eventually, you're going to have to. And I always kind of say, look, you can sit in the seat of your power right now, right here, in the moment to moment, or you can go kicking and screaming, drag behind a boat. That's what's going to happen anyway. So for me, it was better to just get this party started now. It's going to suck. It's already sucked, but I'd rather control the parts I can control. I'd rather steer the parts of the ship I can steer rather than just be taken for a ride. But, for traumatized people, what these spiritual groups, gurus, whatever, what they describe as an ego death is really just disassociation again. And disassociating is not transcendence. It's not enlightenment. It's quite literally our body, our nervous system, our mind, maybe even our emotional body, our emotional state, pulling awareness away from the sensation, from the emotion. So, and again, this goes back to the why it's so attractive, because it feels like we're getting more space. But as you say all the time, that's not actually what happens. It looks like we're getting more space, but things are closing in even tighter.
Yeah. On the topic of dissociation, one thing that I think a huge percentage of people fall into, and I was even guilty of this to a degree, and still probably am, healing is a beautiful work, but often we're trying to fix ourselves because it helps us not think about the trauma we went through. Mm-hmm. Let me find all the ways I can fix my life to avoid this happening again. Let me fix all these things that make me feel like I'm flawed, instead of, this is the work I need to do. I am a human being. I have my flaws, and I want to be better.
Yeah. It's you're letting yourself be pulled away from yourself, and it's a mistake. It's a mistake that you'll have to pay for, because enlightenment and awakening does not remove you from your body. Not true awakening. Awakening does not dissolve your capacity to feel. Does not make you less present or less relational, right? Or less accountable. It actually made me more of those things, to an annoying degree sometimes. But
I feel that's a part of this game.
It is. But that's just again just a signal telling me, okay, well, if that's annoying you, let's see why. Let's see how far that route goes down, and what literal nerve is that touching, right? So one of the problems with the larger spiritual kind of thing is we often forget our body. We often forget the mind. We just want to focus on one part of ourselves, and then when you do that long enough, what happens? Every other part of you starts to beg for your attention. And then it stops begging. It starts breaking crap inside your house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to get your attention. So if you don't integrate your body, in this case the nervous system, along with the rest of this, you may think that you're transcending or awakening or becoming enlightened, but it's just theater. You're just playing. You're not actually integrating. And it will look convincing and it will feel convincing. But guess what? It doesn't hold under pressure. That's the thing here, right? Everything we build, we must build it so that when we are challenged in this life, which we are always challenged in this life, that we can not perform, but we can produce under that pressure. And if you're following a path that can never do that, then you should rethink that. But also, if you're talking a good game and you're not actually building the things that you need to build inside you to hold up against the pressure, then you're not practicing. You're just pretending.
Well, I think an important part too is, when things happen to us in life, we have all these emotions that get stored inside our body. Mm-hmm. If we don't learn to process this stuff out of our nervous system, to truly do the work to bring ourselves back to baseline, then we're always going to be triggered. We're always going to have these heightened emotions in situations that are not to our liking, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
We have to learn to sit in the mud with ourselves, mm-hmm. and allow ourselves to process our trauma, to process our weaknesses. And it doesn't mean that they're bad, but it means to integrate, we must take a true inventory of ourselves and do the work necessary to reach these next stages of enlightenment.
Well, and that's the irony here. As we said earlier, the ego is designed to help us be more grounded and feel more safe, right? Well, if we try to get rid of it, then we can't ground, we can't feel safe, and that's really what enlightenment and awakening and transcendence is really asking us to do. It asks us to inhabit ourselves fully, authentically, and because trauma and healing must be met with grounding. And it must be met with a safe place to sit within ourselves, right? And if we get rid of the ego, then we don't have that part of us anymore. So, yeah, I mean, it really seems like this thing came from a point of good intention, right?
Yeah.
But when you look back at if you just take the top 10 spiritual masters or teachers across all of time, I promise you, none of them would have said, "Yes, let's kill the ego. Let's kill it."
Yeah.
Because none of them did. None of them did. They all suffered the same problems that every one of us human beings do, and that's a dysregulated ego. From time to time.
Yeah.
Now, they seem to have figured it out pretty quick and better than most of us, right? We all will struggle with this forever and ever, but they didn't kill it. They didn't ignore it. And if they did, they learned their lesson and didn't do it for long. So
I guess this brings the real question of how do we truly integrate the ego?
Well, as all things that we talk about with this work, it's far less dramatic than the mystics and the sages will suggest, but also at the same time far more demanding, right? Because we come back
sometimes the simplest answers are the hardest.
Yeah, well, I had this discussion recently about why do people have such a problem following the actual words and actions of Jesus Christ, right? And what it comes down to is, well, because it's really hard to do that. Because you have to, what do you mean? I have to love my neighbor? Or love my enemy? I have to take accountability for not just how I talk, but how I act, how I show up. And so it's really hard because, but real growth is it's unglamorous. It sucks. It's slow. It's boring. It doesn't come with fireworks every time you do something good. It doesn't, there's not this big celebration or whatever. And it certainly doesn't come with this permanent state of bliss, right?
Right.
It's hard and it sucks because you're showing up again and again, sometimes dealing with the same triggers, the same annoyances, the same things. But each time you show up, each time there's a little bit of growth or a little bit of healing, you're a little more skillful at it, especially under pressure. And
well, it's like playing the guitar, right?
Yeah. But it's not loud, it's not boisterous, it's not fun, it's not glamorous. Sometimes it can be, but most of the time it's not. Because it really reveals itself in how we show up in our relationships, to ourselves, out in the world. And that takes a while to see. And especially if we're trying to do this alone, we don't have a lot of feedback, right? That's the hardest part. So, we don't have people cheering us on and, cheerleaders and stuff.
No. Crap, most people are not going to like the work you're doing.
No, they're going to...
You're standing up to me?
Right. Where'd this guy come from? You ever hear that?
What do you mean you don't want to party tonight?
Mm-hmm.
I know that was one of the big ones I ran into is it's like as I was trying to make conscious changes to get my life in order, I had a few people in my life who were just like, you don't want to hang out, you don't want to drink, you don't want to do all these things. It's like, no, I need to get to bed on time. I'm going to the gym today. I can't hang out today.
Right, yeah.
But if they care about you, they'll learn to adjust to you.
And maybe you just rub off on them a little bit.
Yep, that's the hope.
Right, but that's not the goal. We don't care about that, right?
No.
Because we have to take care of ourselves before we could ever take care of anyone else. And the best way to do that is to be the example. But this integration will look like things like emotional regulation, where you can feel things and you can call things out and you can allow yourself to be angry, sad, happy, mad, right? Without letting it control you or overwhelm you. In this arena, it really looks like responding to everything versus reacting to everything. And to kind of piggyback off your point, it looks like boundaries, good boundaries, strong boundaries. Knowing where your responsibility ends and another person's begins, and you don't take it on. You don't take what they're giving you and allowing you to compromise your boundaries just to make them feel better. It's about all.
And you know what? If you struggle with boundaries, like, don't make the goal, I'm going to make sure I hold my boundaries every time. Make it, I hold my boundaries for 10 seconds longer. Just do little things to slowly build the muscle. If you have muscles you've never worked before, it's going to take some lifting before you start building it.
Yeah.
And that's the truth to all this work.
Yeah. It also looks like accountability. Owning your actions, making choices regardless of what happens afterwards, standing by your word,
You have to.
Well, you do have to. You can't be afraid to make decisions, because that's what'll happen if you don't stand by your decisions, if you don't stand by your accountability of yourself, if you don't own your actions, no matter what happens. And owning it looks like, hey, I'm sorry this happened, but that's the choice I made. All I can do is learn from it. So, and doing a lot of these things without being defensive, like you said, if you have friends that will question you and maybe poke at you a little bit because, hey, where'd the old Mike go? Where'd the old Michael go? I liked him better. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because it's about to get a lot worse for you then.
Yeah.
It just, sorry about your luck, bro. This is the direction I'm going. And I hope you'll stick around, and I hope you'll work with me, but if not, it was
I always think about crabs in a bucket, right?
Yes.
If one crab tries to crawl out, the other ones will drag it right back in.
But this is what a healthy ego does. It holds the structure. It holds the boundaries. It carries responsibility. It makes good, loving relationships possible. Without it, there's no structural integrity. There's only just, again, this fragmented self that will mask itself to make it you feel like you're free, but you're not. Because if you're not whole, you can't be sovereign. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go right now, snap my fingers, I'm healed, I'm whole. It's not what I mean. But as you start the work, as you start to put in the work and put in the sweat and the blood and the tears, you will start to, come back together. And
you'll see the changes.
Yes, and every little piece of evidence that you find in that, you'll start to see it. If you let yourself not be trapped by, well, it's not happening fast enough, or it's, I'm not making any headway. Well, because sometimes it's 2 months ahead and 1 day back. And you can't let that 1 day back ruin 2 months of work.
Do you have any other words or affirmations you want to give our listeners before we jump into the affirmations?
So if you guys take one thing from this conversation today, I want you to think about this. If your spirituality, if your path, if your whatever it is, ask you to disappear or to detach or abandon your responsibilities, this is not awakening, it's avoidance. And I want you to try to notice or find one thing this week where you're tempted to disassociate or avoid rather than integrate. And you're gonna have this chance because discomfort comes at us all the time. But don't try to escape it with language, right? Or concepts or philosophy or whatever. And I want to make this, we're not picking on spirituality. I'm a very spiritual person. I'm a very philosophical person. But when those things push me to run from myself versus integrate this into my being, then I must stop. I must stop and ask myself, why is this trying to erase me versus integrate me into a more aligned being, right? So when the pressure hits, and don't try to escape it again with language or concepts or whatever. Stay present as long as you can. 10 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, an hour, you'll get there. Regulate your breath. Feel your body. Try to feel where it's happening in your whole being. And ask yourself, what would a mature response look like in that moment? not a spiritual one, not a philosophical one, not something that you're trying to impress anybody with, but an honest and grounded one. And, choose one act of ego integration, we'll call it, right? Hold a boundary, but hold it calmly. Take responsibility without attacking or judging yourself. Stay present in a conversation that you would normally avoid. And we all have those. You don't need to kill the ego. You just need to mature it, grow it along with the rest of you. Right? Awakening and enlightenment is not leaving yourself behind. It's becoming someone capable of carrying the weight of the world in your life and the light while still remaining present. And that feels impossible, Justin. I get it, but you will get there. 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. And once you let yourself find that momentum, you won't even remember what it was like to not do those things. So that's what I want to leave you with today.
No, it's beautiful. For our affirmations today, I do not need to disappear to be whole. I choose integration over escape, even when it is uncomfortable. My ego is not the enemy. It is something I am responsible for maturing. I can face my pain without dissolving myself. True growth makes me more grounded, not less human.
Amen. Amen. That last one, man, that is the knockout punch. True growth makes me more grounded, not less human. I love that. Thank you for that.
Of course. For our journaling prompts today, where in my life am I seeking relief instead of responsibility? And how do I justify it spiritually? What parts of my identity am I trying to dissolve instead of heal or integrate? If I stopped chasing ego death, what emotional work would I be forced to face? Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed the conversation or you think it could benefit someone you know, please share it. Please subscribe. Please turn on the notifications. Mm-hmm. Also, check us out on all the different platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and also newashla.com, the best website ever.
Best website ever.
With love and gratitude, ad lucem.
Ad lucem.